So I think I've talked a little bit too much about Anthem's presence at E3 these past few days. This is probably going to be the last video I make on this subject, of course unless something big comes up and is worth covering. But anyway, I feel like Anthem being a part of this year's E3 somehow just doesn't sound right. I can't really put my finger on it, but for the past few days I kept thinking about how a game like Anthem, having another big show at the biggest gaming conference of this year, after all it's been through, seems at least a little bit wrong, and I believe both EA and Bioware might very well be doing a big mistake as a result of their choice to show Anthem there barely 3 months after the game's release. So I'm going to explain my reasoning behind this and why I believe this is not really the best choice they could have picked, and it all goes back to a previous video I made when I talked a little bit about how developers taking a more humble approach, actually improving their games silently and not causing too much of a fuss about it, see greater success long term and oftentimes regain fan trust and respect back, rather than, for example, spending more money on advertising and empty words, which is essentially what Anthem is doing right now by being a part of E3. Now don't get me wrong, I do still want to see the game becoming successful once more and make a big turnaround. I also hope one day Bioware can regain the love and respect they used to have from the fans back in the days, and I am sure their work behind the scenes has been tremendous in the past few silent months, even if that meant pushing the fans away even more. But I feel that them forcing spotlight upon themselves once more will detract a lot from that very hard work. Oftentimes I said Bioware's way of improving their game was well intended, but the delivery and execution was oftentimes the part that ruined everything. This wasn't just them bringing good updates, and they did on a number of occasions, only to ruin the rest of the game as a result of a huge number of bugs introduced, but also with the way they chose to talk with the fans, oftentimes shooting themselves in the foot and really only causing more harm towards themselves and their game. They've talked about transparency when they only meant talking and hearing about what they wanted to talk and hear about, diverting discussion from important issues and downright even ignoring it or avoiding real and truthful answers. Let me be clear here for a second, Anthem's road to redemption isn't going to be paved with money. Fans definitely made sure of that, or at the very least not from advertising and other unnecessary fluff, but rather on results that players and paying customers want to see. I believe a big silent update would have been much better choice for Bioware given their current circumstance, and it would have given me and others the confidence that they have learned their lesson. Something like a discreet and detailed blog post, Twitter or Reddit reply would have done just as well, followed of course by a big update that lets players sink their teeth in and gives them a reason to play again. Because believe it or not, most people don't see Anthem's presence at E3 with good eyes anyway. I don't think anyone in their right mind right now will sit there at the presentation and not take it with a massive grain of salt, if not completely doubt it. Reddit, for example, is already spawning a few threads casting shade at Bioware for this, with the biggest complaints still being aimed towards them not acknowledging the game's real problems and of course ignoring communication. And that is of course from a community that has dropped massively in terms of numbers and continues to do so by the minute. For what seems like such a long time now, we've been constantly complaining that there's very few players left in the game to even group up with. Even Reddit right now has less than 1,000 people watching it, so you can imagine how bad it is in game. Anthem was supposed to be a game that rewards high level skill at high level difficulties, but that's never been the case because simply playing at low difficulty GM1 dungeons, for example, is much more rewarding per hour than Grandmaster 3 could ever be, which is the pinnacle of difficulty in this game. And what I find most baffling is that through all of these weeks of silence and no significant updates, Anthem's cosmetic shop was the only one getting actual updates and new content, which again is an irony in itself as Anthem's microtransactions have been its least performing aspect. And through all of this, neither loot nor content were significant enough to keep players going past the 50, 100 or 200 hours they might have spent initially. This game making a presence at another big conference makes it look like the company is chasing new customers instead of taking care of the ones they still have, because nothing guarantees that the new customers won't repeat the same cycle of abandoning it a few weeks or maybe months later down the line, and even more so now with its bad reputation spreading like wildfire. Bioware and EA, no matter if they like it or not, still have a dormant player base waiting for reasons to jump back into Anthem. These people have already paid for the game and for the most part still own it, and for them there's no need for another big E3 presentation. They know what the game is about, they know its current state, and they know that because of the fact that they would much rather spend their time on social media talking about their dissatisfaction and frustrations rather than playing it. The focus should be here on bringing these people back, and big improvements will attract more spending eventually. If people find reasons to play and they see value in the game, they will throw money at it. It's a given. A good product sells itself. It doesn't need more advertising. That is why so many games retain their full launch value even years down the line. A 50% price drop within the first 3 months across the board, which is something currently happening with Anthem, is a last attempt at squeezing a bit more money before the ship fully sinks. Anthem's price isn't low at the moment because retailers are feeling generous, it's because they want to get rid of it and to save at least some of their losses. It's ironic when you think about it, but EA spending more money to advertise Anthem seems like such a cheap move. It's like a poor final attempt at making people love you once more by hoping that throwing money in the air will help with that. It sometimes does, but not when people's trust was already lost because of reasons that money don't always control. People abandoning Anthem isn't a result of the lack of money or lack of advertising. I'm sure both Bioware and EA can pull in more than they need to do that. It's a result of a trust issue that has its roots in empty promises and doubt towards the company's own will and ability to continue improving their game. It's funny to even look at Steam's top 10 most sold games in the past 30 days and see a game like No Man's Sky being there once more, and keep in mind No Man's Sky both was in the same position Anthem is right now and wasn't because of the way Hello Games chose to deliver their updates. Even after becoming successful once more since last year, Hello Games still took the silent and humble approach of improving their game. They didn't throw big shows to try suckering in a few more players, they straight out just resorted to using the blog or Twitter posts with an occasional teaser trailer here and there to make people lose their minds, and that was pretty much it. The game sold itself because people knew it would bring value. They regained the confidence in the developers because they saw the precedent. They saw it time and time again with each new silent update that the game was drastically improving and there were huge steps made into the right direction, and even more so that the fans' feedback was actually amounting to something. Even though Hello Games wasn't that talkative in the beginning days as Bioware is right now with Anthem, they did listen to a ton of the feedback they were getting, and actually some of the biggest features that game has currently is the result of the fact that that feedback was taken into account. In conclusion, yes, I do realize that games need big budgets on advertising, otherwise there's not that many ways for them to attract people's attention. But in Anthem's case, the game is already out, it's already flopped, and it's barely been 3 months since its release, and now it's already going back at E3, which again makes absolutely no sense to me. If the game launched last year and now made another big panel over there with a huge update like an expansion and whatnot, I would understand that and have no problem with it whatsoever, but that is not Anthem's case. I can only imagine how awkward it must be for all of the parties involved over there. For Bioware to make even more promises again after so much silence, after everything that has happened in the past few months with all of the controversies and basically everything that has been exposed about them, and of course on the other hand for fans to look at them and not be overly cautious, maybe even doubting every single word that they are saying. If anything, the way they chose to break their silence after so many months of not saying too much and avoiding discussion is probably the bottom of the barrel worst way of doing it. And in the way, it feels to me like Bioware does not have enough confidence in their own game and in their own ability, which is why they would rather be resorting to throwing more money at advertising in order to bring people back, which I'm not really sure if it's even going to work, and this casts a lot of doubt on the game's future and a lot of other stuff that has been leaked in the past few days about the game going free to play. There's a lot of fear in the community about the game going free to play because it means it's going to probably be a nightmare both for Bioware and for the fans. But yeah, I've talked about that subject and I'm gonna leave it at that. Anyway, this is all I had to say for now. Now tell me down below, what is your opinion about Anthem being a part of E3 this year once more? Do you believe this is something that Bioware should be doing right now, or would you rather prefer a more silent approach, a more humble way of doing things, like for example just releasing the update itself and not postponing it for some big event? And yeah, that is pretty much it. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Of course, a thumbs up and a subscribe would be much appreciated, and I'm going to see you guys next time, so peace out.